Welcome back to the Untitled FWA Podcast. That is right. If you've ever heard one of these, it's been more than a year. And if you haven't heard one of these, then welcome in because it's your up in activity host, TGO, back with another episode. I think the 11th episode in total of the Untitled FWA Podcast. And when I say 11th, the first 10 were all done a long, long time ago. I think there was one done in 2022. All the other ones were done in 2021. So it's been a minute. But I'm here, I'm back, and more than that, I'm returning with someone who I've had on the short list of guests for a long time, one of the longest tenured members of the FWA. More than a decade has passed since he joined. He is the handler of, and you can see the title of the episode, so you know who it is, but I'm still going to be this vague and this mysterious with it. He's the first and only triple champion in the history of the EFED, I believe. I know he's the first. I believe he's still the only. He's the holder of the most X Championship reigns in the history of the FWA. You think of Devin Golden character when you think of the X Championship or Kaizen's record-setting reign. No, this is the king of the X Championship division, and that's a hint. I'm talking about the King Dave Sullivan's, that character, or Saint Sulley, or Redemption, and we'll get into that later. And I'm speaking to the handler of that character and many others, Sulley himself. Sulley, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
A bit of a backstory on this podcast idea. I have done 10 of these. It's been more than a year since I did one. The last one I did was all the way back. Jiggy hosted it and interviewed me. That was like February of March of 2022. The last one I hosted was with Battle Tank, I believe, which was like October of 2021. So nearly 2 years ago, but I've been wanting to do one of these. I've had Sulley on my short list for a long time. I got inspired. I got inspired by Back in Business. I got inspired by the activity. I got inspired by Discord being as fun and as lively as ever. I got inspired by wanting to bring this back to give a little bit more content to people around this time. And I thank and credit everyone in the FWA, mods, regular members, everyone for that. This beast, this EFED, this beast of an EFED is 18 years in. That's an incredible accomplishment when you think about it. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for inspiring me to want to get back and do this and just be more active in Discord and everything else again. Thank you to everybody in the Fed. And Sulley, just you have been in it for 11 years now, which is like on the longer end of anybody ever, and not just in Discord and not just around right now. We have 50, yes, 50, actually more than 50 questions. I added a few at the buzzer. You know, I scrounged for some. I went through the whole history of the Dave Sullivan character. I scrounged for some. You know how it's like 2 a.m. and you're up and you're going through your kitchen cabinets and fridge looking for a snack, you're scrounging for stuff, ingredients to make that snack. That's what I did. I scrounged, but just like at 2 a.m., those 2 a.m. snacks are some of the best things you'll ever eat in your whole life. Some of these questions I scrounged up, they're meaty, they have depth, they're the best things I'm going to ask. So I'm looking forward to it. Should we get started?
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
All right, man. First question has nothing to do with e-fetting. I didn't even put it on the document that I shared with you. Tell us, who are you outside? Like, what do you like to do? Both, FYI, we're both Pittsburgh Pirates fans. That's number one. And I almost canceled this for the fourth time because the Pirates are debuting like two top prospects, and I wanted to watch, but I'm going to watch it later. That's number one. We're both Pirates fans. But what else? I mean, I've seen you on PlayStation, my friends list, playing MLB The Show, playing Madden. Like, what else outside of e-fetting? Well, who is Sulley the handler? What makes you you?
Yeah, I mean, I love sports. You nailed it with the Pirates. Pittsburgh in general, I've always been a big Pittsburgh sports guy. I think everybody in the Discord sports section knows that. Work wise, I help kids with a law firm where I advocate for rights as they're in foster care, making sure they get what they need. Um, so yeah, that's what I've been doing a lot in my spare time. I have a master's in special education. I've worked a lot in schools. I might eventually make my way back there. But yeah.
Let's go into e-fetting. So I think you joined the Fed in, well, I have it right in front of me. June of 2012 was your first match. So let's go back to 2012. We're on pwsforums.com. That's where FWA started. That's where FWA was when you joined. They weren't there for long, but they were there when you joined. They weren't there for long after you joined, is how I should have worded that. Did you get into e-fetting because you liked wrestling more or writing and storytelling more? And then the second part of that question is, are you still e-fetting today because you like wrestling more or writing and storytelling more? And one, there's no wrong answer, obviously. Two, for people who have been in the Fed for a long time and who are of our age group, not in college necessarily, not teenager, there's usually like an order of those answers. They usually kind of go the same way. So I'm interested if you follow the same track as others, or maybe you have a different answer.
Yeah, I mean, I got into e-fetting, I think, because of probably the same way I got in a lot of different things. Like I got into football because of my cousin Brock, who you know. And I
Mm-hmm.
got in the baseball because of Brock. I got into wrestling because of Brock. We played SmackDown versus Raw 2007 together, and I got into it. Um, and so he started this e-fed called HWA, which he actually did on Yahoo Answers back in like 2011. I don't know how he did it, but he ran it through Yahoo Answers and like did shows through there, and eventually um, got on this other forum. So I joined the e-fetting through that forum. Um, we did HWA together. Eventually, I helped Brock write shows. We ran together. We left that forum, ended up in PWS, and that's how I found FWA from there.
So
Um,
today I know, so Brock kind of led you into the world of e-fetting. And I imagine that started because Brock was into wrestling and you were into wrestling. And there's like a writing element, a creative writing, creative storytelling aspect involved, but it's because of you were into wrestling or he was into wrestling, I imagine. Correct? Or is
yeah,
that
for
wrong?
sure. In those early years, I would definitely say that it was, in fact, because of wrestling. A lot of my promos are wrestling based, but I would say that sometime after I joined FWA and took on this whole new challenge because promos were um, taken such a different way with grades and different aspects of those grades of creativity. I really just started to learn how to write different and become a better writer. And that's, I think, whenever I switched into that wrestling to writing side.
I got you. That's usually like when you talk about, like, for instance, me or most people, I think, who are still doing this a decade, 5 years, even plus a decade plus, however many years since they started, like it's the writing, not the wrestling, that keeps them doing it, Like I think the wrestling kind of fades as you get older and you just have watched all of it and you've seen kind of all of it at this point, but the writing is still kind of the thing that can inspire you and can get the creative juices flowing and kind of keep your interest there. Um, so did Brock sign up for FWA? Like, so Brock signed up to PWS forums, you came with him. Did Brock sign up for FWA first, or did you sign up, or like, so was it the same thing where like Brock signed up and then you followed for FWA, or did you sign up on your own?
Now, actually, I think Mac was actually pressuring both of us to join the Fed.
Okay.
But I think I signed up first, and Brock was kind of like hesitant. He didn't want to move on from HWA so soon. I was ready at that point, but I think Brock did eventually follow soon after me.
When you signed up and you signed up the Dave Sullivan character, you'd already had experience writing the character in the HWA. So there was already, like when I signed up the Devin Golden character, I had did not was not in, that was my first EFED. So that was my first promo I've ever done with him. And there's other people who have the same experience, but you had like a baseline of a history. So when you signed the Dave Sullivan character up in the FWA back in 2012, who was the character? Like I know you didn't have like tons of years writing with him, but like who was that character at that point when he was coming into the FWA for his first promo, first match?
Well, I think originally I had not considered his HWA history as like canon. I was kind of starting fresh, and then I sort of retconned his history. back into the character as I went on and kind of learned more about the FWA. But his whole kind of gimmick was that he had this Pittsburgh pride thing. Like he was going to be like the best wrestler in Pittsburgh. And I remember my intro promo. He for my application, he's standing on the Roberto Clemente Bridge, just going off about all these like former characters in Pittsburgh, which I know now is frowned upon. But he was like mentioning Kurt Angle and Bruno Sammartino and how he was better than all of
Yeah.
them. So that's how it all started.
I mean, it's not like the card. It's not the Ultimate Cardinal Sin or anything like that. Like to mention people from WWE, but it is like you. I mean, you do recognize like, oh, people, yeah, like it's like it's like an unspoken thing. Like, oh, you just don't do that because of it's like almost like an alternate universe type thing. But you wouldn't know that coming in.
Right.
So I don't think that you should have been. And it was also an intro promo, so it's not as if it really had like some massive impact on anything. Um, did you have reservations at the time? I know you had reservations later on, like I did for a brief minute. I think you had more of the reservations than me to the point where you actually changed the character's name. But did you have reservations at the time of joining or early on about your character? And I don't, if I'm outing you and you don't want to use this, we can bypass this question, by the way. Being your real life name. Like I like it, like the character, like the Devin Golden character is for me.
No, at the time I didn't. It's funny, whenever you're in high school and you're like 16, 15, like you play Madden, you make yourself, like you make your name.
Of
Um,
course.
but I'd say by the time I was like 19, 20, and I was to that point where I was a different person than these characters that I was making, I had a different life. I didn't get as immersed in the fantasy. Like I had this urge to make new characters of new stories, um, that didn't exactly fit my background. So, uh, with the FWA, I wanted to change the name or make a new character at some point to kind of get rid of that Dave Sullivan name. So yeah, I grew away from it. I say sometime around whenever I was like 19 or 20.
I I've felt the same. I've felt the same thing. The Madden, the baseball video game, you create your own character thing. You envision yourself playing a sport and being like having this career, or being a wrestler and winning the world championship. Like you see that playing out, and that's obviously why I created the Devin Golden character. And then like just like you said, like very quickly after I did that, or not very quickly, but within a few years, I created the Shannon O'Neill character, and I, created the XYZ character. So, I can understand. I definitely understand because I went through kind of the same process. What you're talking about with like, you have this kind of like fantasy dream world of you being a wrestler or being a football player or whatever, and then you kind of move away from that as you mature and get older. Um, your first match versus Jobber Jimbo. The name says it all. He was a jobber character. On June 16th, 2012, it was a debut match. So jobbers are oftentimes the opponents, at least at this time, for debut uh, promos. Do you have any recollection of your first promo against Jobber Jimbo on June 16th, 2012 episode of Smash?
I want to say that I just copy and pasted the promo that I had on my application,
Yeah.
but I can't. It was definitely something that was like very simple. Like he was standing there like doing like a big monologue rant, and it was probably like 500 words, and that was it.
So just
That
like
was about
a basic wrestling promo, like
yeah,
just the general thing you would see as like a vignette on Raw or
yeah,
SmackDown.
for sure.
I gotcha. I think that's par the course with most people. You were in the era of Smash, which for people who don't know what Smash was, it was the FWA's Sunday Night Heat. It would be like this show with like four matches, and they were all like newer characters or lower card characters, and it would be like quote unquote an hour show, and it would always be posted like a day or two before Fight Night, which was like the main show. Um, so not many current FWA people remember Smash. They weren't on Smash. What was it like? You know, again, you were in the HWA. You had other EFED experience, and then now you're seeing this kind of like this again, this Sunday Night Heat to Monday Night Raw type of relationship. where you definitely want to be on Monday Night Raw. You don't want to be on Sunday Night Heat. So, like, what was it like to be on the FWA's version of that
You know
starting
what?
out?
I don't think I minded it as much because there are two things that I just loved about it, and one was the Smash logo was awesome, and I think that Jiggy made that. And the
It
other one
was.
was the Smash intro was like I watched that Smash intro probably 100 times. It's so good. I think Jiggy made that one as well. It's got like Time to Pretend by like MGMT playing, and it's I'm sure I can still find it, but it was an amazing intro, and so it got me so hyped up about the show that I was excited to be on it for the most part.
You went 7-0 to begin your career, quickly graduated from Smash because if you go 4-0 or 5-0, you're going to be off Smash. You went 7-0. You took your first loss in the FWA at Mile High against Brian Carter, who was very good. There are very right 2-3 people in the FWA right now who remember who Brian Carter was, and you and I are probably two of those three. Um, do you remember this at all? You may not, because it was a long time ago, obviously. And do you remember how you dealt with your first loss? Because not a lot of people deal with it well, especially if they're very competitive.
Yeah, especially I got off to that 7 start, and I thought I was like the shit because I was beating guys like Jobber Jimbo. I think I fought like Mike Mundane 3 times on Smash,
Yeah,
um, like Vincent Blackbird a couple times. So like I not to say anything about like Blackbird or Mundane, but the competition was a little bit on the low level.
of
And so I got off
course.
to that quick 7-0 start, and then I got Brian Carter, and I kind of get humbled. So it was an awakening for sure. And I think after that, once I made that jump up, um, it was a learning curve of because I was still writing those like very small monologue type promos, and I hadn't quite figured out how to write like a real winning promo against somebody like Brian Carter yet. So there was a lot of learning at the beginning there.
Your first title reign. So you join on June 16th, 2012. Your first title reign is on July 5th, 2013, when Dave Sullivan defeated Prince Abdullah Asa for, I believe, the X Championship. It was held for 98 days before Dave Sullivan lost the belt on October 11th, 2013, at the 8th anniversary show to Jason Griffin in a match also involving Michael Garcia, a name we will say again at some point in this podcast for sure. Uh, I'm not going to really talk about Jason Griffin because I don't think you really had like a lot of one-on-one matches with him. He had a pretty short yet quick rise to about like the North American Championship level of competition, and he kind of just fizzled out. Um, but Michael Garcia lasted, of course, a lot longer. And this is early on. This is PWS Forms era. This is not WC era. So we don't really know a lot about the handlers as much and their personalities. So you would face Garcia a couple. I mean, I went through the long list of opponents. You'd face Garcia a few times, especially early on. How would you describe that? If you may not remember any of it, but how would you describe, if you remember, the rivalry with Garcia in the X division and the X championship, especially because Garcia did not win a singles championship, and like it was a whole bit about how he just kept losing in really close matches and stuff, including to you.
Yeah, I think that triple threat match happened either like almost right before PWS went down.
Yeah.
Um, I also think it was kind of at a point when I was starting to get burnt out, so I can't even remember if I promoted for that triple threat match or not. Um, I I honestly didn't even know who Michael Garcia was like in the PWS era. Um, he had like said that he was on PWS, and I couldn't remember. So so yeah, to be honest, I could not remember a single thing about Mike Garcia and anything during that PWS era. I didn't even believe him whenever he said he was there with us at the time.
You you did promo. I remember this. So I remember this match. I vividly remember this match. You promoed. Jiggy was a mod. It was a very competitive match. All three people promoed. They were all very good promos. The grades were very close. And Jiggy and I were talking about it. And I was like, yeah, I had Jason Griffin winning. And Jason Griffin ended up winning. And he was like, are you kidding? He literally messaged me on Facebook. He was like, are you kidding? And I was like, what? You think Garcia won? And I was like, he goes, no. He goes, Sullivan won. He's like, I have Sullivan winning pretty easily.
Oh,
So
wow.
you did promo, and in Jiggy's mind, I could probably go back in Facebook and find the message from 10 years ago. You should have won. So,
I wish I remember what I wrote.
right, right. Um, yeah, and we unfortunately, whatever you wrote got lost to the abyss because shortly after this match, like you said, the FWA needed to find a new home because pwsforums.com shut down due to some sort of virus, God knows what. You just couldn't get on. You didn't come over right away with us to Wrestling Click. And I know that was a discussion that you and I had, a couple of times. Not just basic, like what was going on in your head as to why you didn't want to make that switch over initially, because you did, and it didn't take like that long. It wasn't like you waited out for 5 years. You came over eventually pretty soon, but what was like your initial reservations?
Yeah, I don't know. I just took it hard whenever PWS went down. I didn't think that like it needed to go down. I thought the fix was easier than what some of the people in charge at the time were saying it was. So I was really upset. It was like the first time I found this forum that had this community of people that I was so close with. I just got promoted to like S-Mod. Things are going very well, and then like a month later, it's like, oh, the forum's gone, it's dead. Um, so even by the
Yeah.
time that like FWA moved on, it took me a while to finally accept the fact that it was over and it was time to put it behind me.
It was a really good, I mean, it was a really good community. Like there was a pretty lively sports section. Like there was a mafia section. Of course, the EFED section was good. Um, so like and there was and they had a shout box that you didn't have to pay like to be like a subscribed member for, which is different from Wrestling Click. So I totally get, you know, I felt like we lost something from PWS when I came over to Wrestling Click, and the Discord certainly like kind of filled a lot of the gap of like just the camaraderie and the constant communication and chatting. But
Oh yeah,
um
100%.
PWS, like I certainly felt like we had lost something too. So I totally understand that. About 6 or 7 months after pwsforums.com went down, and after we actually went to like a temporary website, but that was just for like one show. 6 or 7 months after PWS went down, and after we joined Wrestling Click, you signed up for Wrestling Click in May of 2014 and returned in a win against the legendary Pablo the Potato. Uh, which was at this time I was head mod, and whenever I would need to think of a jobber, I would just think of the most random fruit, food, whatever, mops, stuff like that, inanimate objects, basically, to be the jobber opponent. So that kind of explains Pablo the Potato, who should return. This is actually the first of your promos that we can find, because the archive preservation project that SS ran. So thank you to SS for preserving this and this amazing work by you for keeping this. Unfortunately, I was going to read part of this promo and ask, follow-up questions, but I was not able to because of work and my kid and whatnot. So I apologize. But in July of 2014, because I remember other promos, so we're going to talk about some of these other promos that I definitely remember. In July of 2014, you beat Mac Machad at Red, White, and Bruised. You didn't have another match for a whole year. You missed the draft for a second brand split and returned towards the end of the split. What happened and what led to this this sojourn away from the FWA? Because I know you had like 6 months off because of the forum PWS going down and not coming over, and then you joined, but then you were kind of off for another year after just a couple months. Do you remember what happened?
I mean, I was very flaky back then. That's the thing. I was, like one time I was promoing and like on a roll, and then the next I'd be like, yeah, I'm done. I'm burnt out. And I would take a long break and come back. I think I just graduated high school that summer and was kind of
Yeah.
like moving into college too. So there was a lot going on, but I eventually was able to like figure it out and get really into FWA again. So
I think one of the things that got you really into it was in August of 2015, and this is one of my favorite arcs of the Dave Sullivan career trajectory. You came back in August of 2015 to defeat Lord Vincent Blackbird, but you were under the masked persona of the Redemption. And I want to say, and tell me if I'm wrong, that did you create a separate account on Wrestling Click, or did you just go as just you, like the same account you had, and just make it
No,
like a separate
actually,
character?
I was PMing you my promos and you were posting them for me. So like it was
Oh my
secret, but
God.
yeah.
That's right. So I love this. So what was the inspiration for this shift in the Dave Sullivan character? Because again, you were like this Pittsburgh pride type character. And then like, and even if you even go evolving beyond that, when you're ex-champion, you're like, just like a baby face, like, a general like ex-championship, like, slightly underdog type of baby face character. What shifted over to this kind of darker persona?
Yeah, I always thought that writing like these egotistical heels was too easy, and I wanted to kind of like bring this like really in-depth like anti-hero character that maybe did some dark things, but still was somebody you could root for. And his whole gimmick was that like he was redeeming himself for his past actions, but at the same time he was kind of self-righteous about it, like that he was like better and change now, but maybe he wasn't. So I was exploring some of those different character attributes and seeing what I could do with them.
So again, like you're using a whole year off from the FW. Like there's a year break between Sullivan's last match against Mac Machad winning, and then this net match where he's the redemption against Lord Vincent Blackbird. And I don't know if this year is exactly when the promos flashbacks, but there was these flashbacks, if I remember correctly, and you tell me if I'm wrong. There's either one promo that I remember or there were a lot, but I definitely remember one where like the setting was in prison. And I think like regularly the setting of these promos was in prison as like flashbacks. Am I
Yeah,
correct in
yeah,
am
for
I
sure.
correct in that?
There was at least two. There was two I remember. One was a promo that was it was a letter that was written from another prisoner, and this prisoner was like describing these things that this like redemption guy was doing in jail and how scary he was. Um, and then another one was I think from the point of view of a prison camera, and so like the camera was like the point of view, and it was describing things that like Sullivan was doing, and I used that as a narrative throughout the promo. So I was like, not only was I going back and trying to like tell the story of what had been going on in the last year, but I was exploring like different ways to get creativity points, like through those different points of view as well. So it was a experimental phase for sure.
Eventually the redemption arc finished. The mask came off. It was Dave Sullivan character. Your second reign as ex-champion is started on October 31st, 2015 at Mile High when you defeated the Passion character, which was Eel's character. Passion actually won the X Championship from Devin Golden, so you're like two removed from Devin Golden's last X Championship reign. You held that title for 147 days. And I was looking through the people you were defending the belt against, the people who you were facing. There's a lot of Mac Machad, a lot of Vincent Blackbird, a lot of Passion, a lot of James Eisen St. Hughes during this stretch. Did you get I'm going to use this phrase, it might not be exactly correct. Did you get some cabin fever, like fatigue from facing the same group of characters in the mid card level?
Yeah, I'd say a little bit. At the time, we didn't have like as deep of a mid card. It was kind of like that same group. I wouldn't say it was like a fatigue of facing the same people just because they're the same, but if I'm candid, honestly, at the time, I think there was a lot of no shows between like Mac and James and maybe from Blackboard a little bit too. So it was a little bit disappointing in doing some of those angles, but I did enjoy that whole time in that division, and there's a lot of history to kind of go back to, like especially with Vincent Blackbird and Sulley, that it was nice that it happened at least.
You lost your second X Championship reign to Thomas Jordan. We're going to go a little bit more into this one because I remember this feud. So when you lost to him, it was the second of 3 matches between you two. The first one, the Sullivan character won. You lost the second time. And then the third was a rematch against him at Back in Business. This is 2016 Back in Business. So this is Back in Business, I guess 11 in an octagon match. For context, Thomas Jordan was like this MMA style wrestler. I loved Thomas Jordan character. MMA, when there's not a lot of MMA style wrestlers or characters, an MMA style character is like a breath of fresh air. And Thomas Jordan's character, because there was no other MMA style, was a breath of fresh air. And so you're facing him in an octagon match, which of course, is fitting for that character. And you won. You beat him at Back in Business 11. What was that rivalry feud like? And again, from what I can recall, because you're facing the Mac Mashads and the Lord Blackbirds, who, like, there's characters you can have a feud with, but you're a level above them at this point. And before you're having feuds with these people around this time, you're probably not having like really in-depth feuds. And this was kind of one of those. This was the one that I can remember that was one of the first feuds that you had that had some depth to it. Do you remember it the same way? And what was that feud like for you?
Yeah, for sure. Thomas Jordan was the first person that like I actually would say I had a real feud with. And that was only because the handler for Thomas Jordan was actually putting in work. Like I originally wasn't like even like willing to do it, but he kept like setting up segments and doing things to build up, and I got into it at that point. I was like, yeah, let's do this, and it just kind of like built up from there. Actually, I think Jordan was more of like a boxing character. He
That's right.
had the
No,
handler.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Not
his base
MMA.
pick
You're
was
right.
like was Creed, like the new Creed. Thomas B. Jordan was his base pick, I think. Um, and Sulley picked the Octagon. Like I think they had a match before Back in Business that year where the winner got to pick uh the stipulation, and Sulley being like more of like this like CM Punkish kind of like Muay Thai fighter, like thought that he could do more of an Octagon and get Thomas Jordan on the ground. Um, yeah, and the promo I wrote for that final match at Back in Business is actually one of my favorite promos ever. It's like this whole like rhyming folk tale story, like where each line rhymes with the last one, and it's one of my favorite promos that I wrote because it flows so nicely. It's funny. I'm gonna have to like try to go back and find it, but yeah, that
So
whole
you
feud.
remember vividly like the promo you did for that match.
I do, yeah.
That's
There was a lot
cool.
of build up because Sully had this really weird uh multiple personality like angle. Like he had like different personalities. One was a little girl, one was like each promo it would be like a different character, but it was actually just a different Sully personality. Um and that promo at the end was kind of like wrap that up and for Sully to kind of like bury all of that and heal, but also move on and win the championship. So
I like it. You're right. For Thomas Jordan, handler, if you are out there, I don't know if you are, he was a boxing type character, which was even more unique because you see MMA styles come through every now and then, which again is fresh. I like it, but we don't really see a boxing character come through. And he was that boxing character, and it was very fresh. I love the character. I wish he would have stuck around a little longer.
I
But
think he
anyway,
left after I won in that match. I think he kind of like lost momentum, but
I
I love Thomas Jordan too.
yeah, yeah. Okay, third reign again started it Back in Business 11, held for 77 days, lost the belt to Gene Luke Watkins at Red, White, and Bruised on August 14th, 2016. Damn SS and his just his skill. This marked the end of your third X title reign. You left the FWA for 2 years. I can ask you what happened, but it's probably you're you know, in college, I imagine, or like late teenager, maybe 20 years old. Like you have other stuff going on. But if you remember specifically why did you leave for that long? Because that's a long time too.
Yeah, actually, I might have took a few months off in between there, but this one, um, if you're looking at Sully's match history, it looks like I took a break. But this is actually the time that I was doing Ground Zero, and looking for a new character,
Oh,
and I'm like looking to kind of like put Dave Sullivan away and start a new character fresh. And that first season was all characters I made and was kind of like testing them all out to see. Ty Johnson ended up winning. He was the favorite amongst everyone who was reading. So he won, and part of the reward at that time was not just an FWA contract, but to be managed by Sulley. So
That's
Sulley
right.
managed Ty Johnson for some time, until eventually I got sick of the Ty Johnson character, and that's whenever Sulley came back for his biggest reign of all.
Yeah, so let's go into that one because that's the one that everyone is going to remember, and that's the one that obviously is like the biggest feather in his cap. You return on July 4th, 2018. Happy Independence Day for the United States, at least, in a tag match win with Penny against Lord Dog and XYZ, who eventually became tag team champions. That's a pretty good win for Dave Sullivan and Penny. And also you and Jimmy King becoming a little tag team there, role playing tag team. Um, it's also against XYZ, so you beat me. Next match, then very next match, your fourth X Championship reign begins on July 15th, 2018. I'm not a mod at this point. So this is Jiggy as a mod. It's back in business 12 when Sulley won in a fatal four-way ladder match. It was held for a record-breaking, at the time, 509 days before being vacated by the general manager, Lord Vincent Blackbird, on December 6th, 2019. I'm going to ask a question that probably has an obvious answer. Which was your favorite of the four X Championship reigns?
Yeah, you're right. It's the last one. Um, but originally, the funny thing is, my whole plan when I came back was I was gonna do one last hurrah. I wanted to beat Rondo's three. Like Rondo and I were tied for like the most X title
Yeah.
reigns at three, and I wanted to beat that. I wanted to be number one. So I wanted him to come back and do that one more time. He was gonna have his reign. He called himself the king of the X division because like his whole gimmick was like, this is my ceiling. I
Yep.
know that, but like I dominate this division, and I'm the king. And he had the four reigns. He was gonna have that until he lost, and then I was going to retire him and go back to Ty Johnson and move on. But obviously, 509 days later, things changed. So
Yeah, it certainly changed. This is the best and longest stretch of your career in the FWA with the Dave Sullivan character, with any character. It's one of the best and longest stretches of any character's career among any handler. Instead of facing the Mac Machauds and the Vincent Blackbirds and the James Eisen St. Hughes and the Mike Mundanes, you're in regular matches against Mike Parr and Kevin Cromwell and Jason Randall and Michael Garcia again. But Garcia was better than he was back in 2012 and 2013. And then you're even leveling up beyond that because we're going to get to Cyrus Truth and Gabby and, on and on and on. Did you feel like your writing ability at this point, this is 2018, 2019, did you feel like your writing ability had taken a step up, a level up from the 2012 to 2016 era? And you had already been toying with that. Like you just talked about your back in business promo against Thomas Jordan, and the rhyming sequence, and these multiple personalities and the redemption arc. So like you're already venturing into this more like creative, cinematic, thematic storytelling. But do you think that the writing, even beyond those levels, again leveled up when you had this long, eventually triple crown, like triple champion, but this long X championship reign?
yeah, I think part of it was I was older. I was in my like early 20s. I was in college, taking writing classes, writing papers. So I had a lot of practice at the time. But I think understood that part of the reason why I wasn't as successful early on was I was writing like these great writing pieces, but they weren't related as much to like wrestling. Like they were like going on about like the multiple personalities, but I wasn't connecting it back to the match. But with the King Sully character, he kind of was like the stripped down, like super cliche wrestling heel. I'm the king, I'm the best, and I'll go on like these big monologues and like still had like a nice theme. Like it was very simple in a way, but I was following like that grade formula and like hitting the actual grade points more than I was like writing a promo that I thought was just a good story. So I think that's kind of where a big step from what I was in those first few years.
About 8 months into that fourth X championship reign, I should say, uh, you win the North American Championship in March of 2019 when you beat Star, who was the champion, and Kevin Cromwell in a triple threat match. You were also defending the X Championship in the match, so it was like one of those I guess winner takes all type matches. Again, I was not mod. Jiggy was mod at this point, so I was a little bit more on the peripheral of paying attention to the FWA. But you became one of the very few people at this point to hold both the X Championship and the North American Championship at the same time. And you didn't stop there. You held the title for almost 300 days before losing in a triple threat match involving Mike Parr and Crash, when Parr pinned Crash to win the title, and that kickstarted the infamous car crash, Parr crash is what I called it, but the infamous Crash Mike Parr feud that actually kickstarted the random pairing tag team tournament and kickstarted TXR and Golden Rock, etc. So all that can be traced back to losing this match for Sulley. So thank you to you for taking
Anytime.
one for the team there. I've got nothing specific to ask regarding the North American Championship because I think the X champ, because you were still calling yourself the king of the X division. And I think even at the time, because I was getting more back into the fold and I was paying more attention to what was happening in the FWA and your promos, I was reading your promos. I think even at the time you would tell me if I'm wrong, but like you were saying regularly, I care more about the X Championship than the North American Championship, right?
Yeah, I do. It's funny because Raw kind of did that same thing, or Roar kind of did that same thing with his X title reign, but he was saying it was more like the world title. I don't think
Right.
Sway was that egotistical about the X title, but he was at least saying that like at that time the X title had been like specifically for a while for younger, newer wrestlers or like the lowest like division. Um, and Sully was like, not anymore. Like this is better than that. Like this is better than the North American title. I think James Hughes had been the NA champion for quite some time during that period, and Sully had beat James a few times. So he's like, I beat that guy a bunch of times. Like I'm better. This title's better. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a fun gimmick.
You became a triple champ. I mean, that's obviously a huge thing. You're the first person, I believe, the only person to ever be a triple champ in the entire history of the FWA. You finished what Mike Parr started back in like 2016 when he almost became triple champ. Mike Parr walked so Dave Sullivan could sprint, not just run but sprint, and you became a two-time FWA world champion. Your first reign began on October 18th, 2019, when you defeated Cyrus Truth and Gabrielle in a triple threat match at Desert Storm. The lead up to that match was the whole FWA CWA angle. Uh, you know, I saw you and Cyrus talking about this in Discord. Golden was the first person off the commentary table to get involved, and then Garcia followed. And then Sulley did pin Golden in that 6-man tag team match to get the title shot. And I think when I think back to that, I was like, the Dave Sullivan character had been on this tremendous run. He's ex-champion, he's North American champion. Like we want to push new people into the main event and like give new people opportunities. So like this is an obvious way to do that, whether it's Sullivan or Crash. And it was Sullivan. And it's like, I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, if you tell me if you agree with this general perception among the Fed, because the Discord at this point had not started yet, I don't think. Sullivan's going to get this opportunity against Gabrielle, who's an all-timer, and Cyrus Truth, who at this point was, a 4-time world champion. It's like it's a cool story. It's great that Sullivan's getting this opportunity. Who knows? But you don't expect Sullivan to win. Well, he fucking won. So, what was like? Tell me, what was your mindset? Like, did you also think like, I don't know if I have a good shot of winning this thing, but I'm gonna give it my best shot? Or were you on such a roll, such a confidence high, that did you honestly think like, you know what? I think I'm just better than everybody in the Fed at this point, and I'm going to win.
No, I loved my promo. I thought it was like it had a great chance, but I read the promos that Cyrus and Gabby put in too, and they were just as good. They all had different styles, and it just kind of depends on which style the grader likes best. Um, and yeah, I honestly didn't know if I had won or not. I remember you actually you messaged me beforehand and teased me and asked me if I wanted to know if I won or not. And I think I was just a Steeler game, like they just beat the Patriots. I was like, yeah, like I'm on such a high right now. Like even if I lost, I'm still gonna be okay. And you're like, yeah, you lost. I think it took
I
like a few
usually
hours
I
or a couple
usually do
days.
that.
So
I usually do
yeah,
that. Yeah.
but
Uh, did I tell you late? Like, did I tell you later on? Like, oh, I was just kidding, or did you not find out until you actually read the show?
no, you felt bad because I was like, oh man, like, but that's okay. Like I'll have another shot. Like I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna finally do it. Um, I knew like I had held the X title and the NA title for way too long, and there was no way like the gas was running out. Like I was defending those every week, I think, at that point. And I knew it was only a matter of time before I got put up against like Michelle von Horowitz or somebody else that like it was gonna be gone. And so I knew that like my chance of being a triple champ at that point was gone if I had lost. So I think I was upset about that. But you're like, oh, now I feel bad. So like you actually won. So, but yeah, that's how it went out.
That's usually how it goes. I try and trick you, and I get guilty about it. Um, it was held for an incredible 407 days. Uh, you know, I'm not sure exactly when this happened, but sometime during this incredible run with the fourth X title reign beginning to winning the world title a second time, you took up the name like the king of the X division and eventually just the king of the FWA, Dave Sullivan. And to me, you had one of the best theme songs ever in Hail to the King by Avenged Sevenfold. And I say that pretty much every time the theme song conversation comes up in Discord. So from like an accomplishment standpoint to a gimmick standpoint to a theme song standpoint, like to me personally watching this as not the handler and just a mod and just a fan, you're like knocking out of the park on every single facet. Do you feel like this was the most like was this the most fun period for you?
Yeah, I think probably because of all the success, it definitely is the most memorable. I mean, I had fun with like all my different arcs, like Redemption, um, King of the X Division, even Ground Zero. But but yeah, like obviously the winning and the success, it was definitely a fun ride. So I can't complain about that. But like I think we had the conversation before about why I ended the King um gimmick was I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure that I didn't get burnout and fade away. Um, the, I think I ended it at the perfect point because if I had let it go on sooner, like it would have got stale, would have got old. But it ended at a point that people can still kind of go back and say, like that character is awesome. I remember it as being awesome. You know, like those TV shows, like some TV shows just go on for way too many seasons, and they're like, oh, that should have ended like 5 seasons ago. But seasons, the shows like Breaking Bad that end in its prime. Like that's what I wanted to do for the King gimmick, and I think I did that. I mean, whether Sully has had as much success since then, he hasn't, but at least the King gimmick is definitely looked back on with pride. So
You were also the king of like a metaphorical promo idea because you would do a lot of these, and I mean, not even just metaphorical promos, but like you would like pop culture references to like you were pretty good at that. I vividly remember grading a Jurassic Park promo. I believe it was against Michael Garcia. Actually, I'm
it was, yeah,
99.9% positive it was against Michael Garcia, where Chris Kennedy was kind of taking you along as a guide through the Jurassic Park. And there was a lot of others, and it was a style that really worked for you, I think. Um, was this something that kind of came naturally to you, where you just like easily think like, oh, Jurassic Park, like, oh, this, that, and the other. I don't, pick a theme. I don't know. Um, where like you could just think like easily these ideas came and you just fleshed them out, or you know, did you have
yeah.
to kind of go searching for it?
Yeah, honestly, I have a notepad on my phone, an app that I just write all my ideas down. So I'll be sitting there watching a movie, and I'm like this will make a great promo, and I'll like write it down Jurassic Park, and then I'll figure out like down the road like how I'm gonna make it actually like work with what's going on and with the opponent. But that's how I get most of my ideas. It's just like watching TV or just getting inspiration like that. The worst is whenever you're like it comes in the shower or something and you forget it by
Yeah.
the time it comes. I've had a
Yes.
couple of those.
I've had those a few times. And those are usually the best ones. I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
brilliant. And then you get out and you don't remember. It's like a dream. You forget the dream after 5 minutes after you get out, after you wake up. Um, do you wish, tell me if I'm wrong about this, if I'm misremembering, but I think I'm right. Do you wish you could have had a one-on-one feud and match, like at a pay-per-view with Cyrus Truth? You had the triple threat, and then you had the one-on-one feud with Gabby when she was holding the golden opportunity. But I don't think you ever had one with Cyrus. Yet Cyrus Truth was obviously like you won, like he was the champ that you won the world title from when you won it the first time. So like he's Cyrus Truth. He's just been in the FWA. You know, this whole from 2018 at the start of this amazing run that you had with the Sullivan character till now, he's always been there. Do you wish you could have had a match or feud with him, especially because he was linked to the character, yet you didn't get that full blown match feud rivalry.
Yeah, I wish we definitely had some sort of like more one on one. Sully and Cyrus Troop did fight one on one. Like a few months I think before, it was like that January before he won in October. Sully beat Cyrus like one on one at fight night, like in the main event. It
But it
was
was
kind of
just
like
it
his
was just a
first
it was just a
official.
fight night though. It wasn't like a feud.
Yeah, it was like a one-off. It wasn't a
Yeah.
feud. I think if I remember, Cyrus the handler was kind of like I can't believe let him get the best of me. I think I saw on the shout box one night that he was like I want a rematch so I can beat him because Sully was. I think Sully at that point had brought it up like in every promo, like I beat the world champ, like I should have a
Yeah.
shot. And so Cyrus wanted to shut him up for good. Uh, but yeah, and Cyrus and I have talked like in the Discord about even like things that we wish we would have done as far as like tag teams go. There was a couple moments where like Sully and Cyrus would have made like a great tag team together. So, you
They
know,
would
like
have.
what ifs?
They would have. You described yourself as like a CM Punk type character, and Cyrus Truth's, the base pick is CM Punk. So it makes sense. Cyrus and Sully, their characters and their styles and stuff like that seem very similar. Um, Especially at this time. And at this time, many people would argue that Michael Garcia was getting maybe one too many shots at the world title. Nova Diamond won Carnal Contendership, had his shot at it, but lost it back into business. Aleister Black got a shot, and from this like gauntlet style match involving all the X division people who had never had a world title shot, Gabby was the golden opportunity briefcase holder. Had an angle regular teasing a cash in at first, but then kind of sort of faded away until she cashed in at the pay per view before back into business when she lost. We as mods were kind of holding Michelle back a bit to make sure she had time to build up to being in the main event, and she had her whole feud with Mike Parr. So there was some criticism of the main event scene being stale. Golden was in the tag division, etc. Um, I think a lot of it was probably stemming from the fact that Garcia just got like 3 title matches in a year. Do you agree with that looking back? Do you wish that you could have defended the belt against any other 1 or 2 or 3 characters? Like when you look back at it, are you like, yeah, it was a little stale? Or you were like, you know what? Like, I don't care. Like, it's what we had. It's what the cards were.
I mean, like you said, we had so many characters that kind of had other things going on at the time, like really good stories. Um, so it was kind of one of those situations where they had such good stories and such good roles that you didn't want to take away from that. Cyrus, I think, had been in the world title picture for the last like 3, 4 years at that point. Um, I definitely
Right.
was one that wanted to see him have a chance to pick up some other titles. Like I could see him having that NA title reign before it happened, like years prior. Um, I wanted to see him have those accolades. So whenever like we look back and say like, look at this great Cyrus Truth character, like it's not just all world title reigns. He's got like NA title, he's got X title. Um, I think now it's great to see that he's finally back in there and seeing Cyrus Truth back like in the main event and back in business. It's fresh again. It's like you're excited. I'm rooting for him to win because he's back. He's had that break. He's ready to like take the world back. But but no, I think it got a little bit too unfair criticism at the time. But there's probably some things we could have done better booking wise. If I had to pick one world title match for Sully that I wish would have happened, I'd say it'd be Mike Parr. Some people think that like Garcia was like Sully's biggest rival, but I think like Sully and Parr kind of came up together at the same pace. They are both in the X title picture for a while. Parr had beat him for the NA title. Like they had been going back and forth and had this like really good, intense, like Cold War kind of feud. Um, and so seeing them in the world title picture, like one on one. I know he comes back later on in that main event with Michelle von Horowitz, but I would have liked to see more Sully Parr one on one at one point.
So I'm gonna go through every single accomplishment, like all the major single, like just the individual accomplishments for the Dave Sullivan character. You own every major. I mean, you at one point owned every major record involving the X Championship. You know, you have the most championships won. You had at one point the longest X Championship reign. I think now it's second longest. Um, I want to say you still have the most combined days as X champion, which is 831 days. You have the longest reign holding at least one title in the FWA of 867 days. So for everyone understanding what that means, for a little bit less than 2.5 years, the Dave Sullivan character held at least one championship, like consecutively for a little under 2.5 years. That's incredible. You have the second longest reign as FWA World Champion behind Matt Boudreau at 407 days. That was yours. You participated in the main event of Back in Business for 2 consecutive years. Defeated Nova Diamond at Back in Business 14 to retain the FWA World Title, and then lost to Michelle von Horowitz at Back in Business 15 to end your second and so far last World Title reign. And that match also involved Mike Parr. There seemed like there was this build of Michelle kind of being the one that was going to go up against Sulley. And especially like Back in Business was like, it was almost like the trajectory thing where like Michelle was going to get into Carnal contendership and win, because at that point it felt like SS was just like on a plane with like you and anyone who was like the best, but really but you. So it's like he was the favorite to win Carnal contendership. This made sense. But he had this feud with Parr that wasn't finished, and we tried to finish it, and we had this match where like if Parr wins, Parr gets in, and Prod wrote a great promo and beat him. Do you wish that, I mean, it was a triple threat feud, a triple threat match. It just got a little wonky in the build up. Like it did. I mean, like I had mod, I was trying to work with you guys. It got a little wonky in the build up. Do you wish it could have been either, like, it's hard to say like which one would you have rather faced, like between Michelle and Parr, because Michelle won Carnal contendership. But I would think it's fair to say like you wish it would have been a one-on-one feud.
Yeah, you know, um, at the time I did. Like I was a big belief that I think like I had a pretty good idea that Soy was gonna get taken down at that Back in Business. It just felt like it was time. I pushed my luck as far as it could go. And I always thought that he should be taken down like in a one-on-one match. Like it seems like he's more dethroned that way. Um, but in hindsight, like I really wish that I had handled kind of like the build up to that better. Like SS and Prod were like carrying their weight and doing like a lot of great build up segments and everything, and I feel like I didn't contribute enough to that. So I apologize though for them now. I could have definitely done some of that better. I think we did end up having a gimmick in a triple threat match for it was like elimination. So I think like Parr went first, and then it was kind of like Sully and MVH one on one, and she took him down. So like it still kind of had that moment where he was dethroned, and she like officially kind of like took out the king, and it was like a passing of the torch sort of thing. So it all played out pretty well.
Towards the end of the reign, you shifted away from King Sully to Saint Sully. I know you've talked about why you kind of shifted from King Sully. It was time. You felt like you ran its course. The Saint Sully thing kind of coincided with the Saints and Sinners stable. Talk about what the inspiration and thought process was behind the Saints and Sinners, which was with Ty Johnson and Kleio, if I'm correct. Correct?
Right, right. I think I just wanted to kind of start a new chapter for him. Like the King stuff when I went so far, it was time to start some new stories, like tell some new background for different characters and for Sully, and like be this leader. Like Saints and Sinners was originally kind of gonna be like a CM Punk SES kind of gimmick, like this cult like very weird um egotistical stable, but something along the way, I just kind of lost motivation. I think Eli Black was also doing a cult gimmick at the time too, and I was kind of like I'll let him do his cult. Like I'm gonna focus more back on Sulley and kind of get him back on track for the world title picture and keeping this title as long as possible. So, um, yeah, I wish that story didn't get dropped, but it worked out.
So the tag team stuff. Um, at some point, winning the tag titles and becoming a Grand Slam champion became a major part of not just your goal as a writer, but like you imprinted that onto the actual Sully character, the Saint Sully character. Like that was vocal for him, like in canon. So first it was Saint Sully and Ty Johnson, and you guys were in that random pairing tag team tournament, I think. And then I believe it was the Hollywood Saints with Saint Sully and Joe Burr. And then this led to obviously like the team broke up and you guys had a feud at Back in Business. I know the tag division was tough sledding at the time. It was very competitive. And there was a lot of uphill climbs with like Osos Locos and Gangstar's. And the Tag Wars thing, which was again like super highly competitive. Michelle and Gerald Grayson. At what point did you drop that quest to win the tag titles with Sully? At what point were you kind of like, okay, like I gave it a shot. It's just like it ain't for me to keep going with it.
Right. Honestly, up until he retired, it all kind of made sense at the end there. Like that was actually one of my favorite stories. Like after the King one, was like whenever Sully came back on Meltdown at the beginning and was looking for this tag team partner. And so like I think he like was testing out different people. I think
Yeah.
Greg, like Jack Severino came back for a cameo. And like there was all
Yep.
these cameos. And eventually he ended with Joe Burr, and then that led to its own feud. And then Brock came back and we did the HWA thing for a while. Um, but I think by that point I was getting like sick of Sully. I was I was working a lot at the time. It was I was finishing up grad school. I just didn't have enough time to focus both on like a tag team of Saint Sully and like working with Brock at the time and do Kleio and her like Fallout story. Um, so I had to pick between Kleio and Sully, and I already decided like a year ago that I was going to focus right on Kleio. Um, so yeah, I gave Sully a break, and then I decided like Sully had enough, like he was going to retire. Um, and yeah, we kind of used that story of like he wanted to be his Grand Slam champion, but in his speech he's like, I accept that like that's not going to happen, but like those accomplishments like they don't mean anything to me. Like my accomplishments are seeing my daughter and like her winning in soccer or her like getting good grades. Like those are what I want now. Like those are the accolades I'm chasing now. So it all kind of had its end um, for the Saint Sully character, where he kind of accepted that it wasn't going to happen and was totally content with that.
You just kind of described like someone like those are like very like family man type of wholesome. Those are wholesome things to kind of be happy with and look forward to and kind of you know self-evaluate and your own self-worth. Are you putting a little bit of your own like worldviews and stuff and like who you are as a person, not just the character Saint Sully, but who you are as the handler and the person outside of the E-Fed into that? Like that these are things that
Yeah,
like you would also value whenever that time happens?
yeah, I think so. I've always kind of, like I think I've mentioned in Discord, like my dream is to be a foster parent and adopt a kid out of foster care. Um, I would choose that over work any day, like over like career goals. So yeah, a little bit. Saint Sully, even though I kind of put some of that in there, he's definitely not like my personality. He's a lot more egotistical. He towards that last stretch, I was like kind of basing him off like the BoJack Horseman personality, where like
Yeah.
he like wanted to be better, but like he knew he was a piece of shit, and he kept messing up and kind of like regressing, even though he tried and just like it didn't work out for him. So it was all just a little bit of that.
Will we see another run with the Saint Sully character?
Oh, I mean, the last we saw, he kind of came out and had this. I kind of based it off what happened with Edge like a decade ago, whenever he had that career-ending
Yeah, but
injury.
then
He
we saw what
retired.
happened with Edge. So
Yeah, and Edge came back. So it's not to say that it's not ever gonna happen. I have this dream that like 5, 6 years from now, maybe even like 4 or 3 if I retcon her age. But I had this kind of like dream that I'm gonna eventually bring like Sammy Sullivan into the FWA, and I can see like Saint Sully being either like a manager or getting kind of like dragged back in as like an old tag team partner and kind of like seeing her through that. So you never know.
that'd be cool. If I was to say to you, the Dave Sullivan Saint Sully character is one of the 10 best at minimum, at worst, fringe 5 best in the history of the FWA. Would you agree? Does that give you pride? Do you think it should be higher?
Yeah, it's good to hear that. Definitely some pride. I could agree with 10. 5, it's hard to make an argument, but I think 10's like I'll agree with that.
That's just the Dave Sullivan character. We're 33 questions in. That's just the Dave Sullivan character. There's others. And then there's just like the general you being a mod and stuff like that. So we're gonna keep going here if you're good with it.
Yep.
We can possibly like do lightning round here in a second, but that's all. That's 11 years of a character being in the FWA. I mean, not 11 consecutive, but no one has ever 11 consecutive. You were here with the character of Dave Sullivan, Saint Sully in the FWA for, if you want to add it all up, 7 years out of 11. 7 years is incredible. So, I mean, most aren't around for more than 3. Even fewer make 5. So, 7 is insane. There's, Ty Johnson and Kleio de Santos, I think, are the main 2 secondary characters. Which is your favorite?
Oh, that's a tough one. Um, I'd say probably Cleo. She's kind of like the first, like even though like Ty was my first attempt to get away from Sully, Cleo was like my first one I felt like was well received and just I enjoyed writing for her. She was fresh and different. Um, she's still kind of working on getting her first championship someday. It still hasn't happened yet, but yeah, I'd say she's my favorite. And the Coven, who I'm writing with now, are definitely up there too.
You've always seemed, yeah, the Coven as well is new, I guess, other characters aside from Sullivan. You always seem to have your secondary or new characters tied to one another. For instance, Ty was connected to Sulley and became his partner. Sulley was his manager. Kleio, tell me if I'm wrong. Kleio is the adopted child of Saint Sully and part of Saints and Sinners as well. The Coven is tied to Kleio. So like you've never brought in a character that's like been, or for long was like independent of another character you had. Is that always been intentional? Where they're always kind of enhancing each other and building on each other? Or
Yeah,
did
I
you
mean,
ever have the plan of coming in and being separate?
yeah, it's kind of like world building where you have access to all these characters that you can kind of use to your advantage without having to like ask somebody else if you can use their character. Um, Cleo, kind of like part of her story was at one point during her Fallout build was that she like didn't want to be associated with Sully. She kind of, saw him for what he was at that point. Wanted to like separate and be her own thing. So that was, I kind of made that like a whole story where she was breaking off, like she was like outcasting him and doing her own thing. And that's kind of, I think the last interaction they had of each other was Sully was kind of like saying, "Stay away from the Coven, like they're bad news, like don't trust them." And and she originally was going to. She didn't like the Coven, but whenever Sully, this like father figure, did that, the young Cleo had to rebel, and it pushed her. He pretty much pushed her right into this group.
Let's go to everything you've done outside of being a handler. Um, you've done some incredible work with the organization, the title histories, records, accomplishments, etc. That whole thread, which I think you organized and like made that a thing that you wanted to do when you were mod, and you kept with it after being mod. There's no question that that's a huge, just like having all that in one space is incredible. I mean, it's just like massive, massive help to anyone who's looking at the history of the Fed. So thank you. It deserves a shout out. I think you joined the mod staff in 2020. I think I made the decision that summer, if I recall, to remove Sarah from staff and added you. We had been talking about you joining staff for a long time at that point, and it was me, you, and Jimmy for about 7 to 8 months before we expanded the mod team in prep for the brand split. And a little after the split, you stepped down. What did you enjoy most about being a mod? And what did you enjoy least about being a mod?
Yeah, I think my most favorite thing about being a mod was just um all of the record keeping. I love that part. As you
So you
mentioned,
got to
like
do
you know, like
so you got to do it after you stopped being a mod. Like you get the best
yeah,
of both worlds. Yeah.
right, exactly. Yeah, I love like keeping all that stuff, like reorganizing. Like there are so many like projects I wanted to do, um, including like archiving projects. Like originally, before like we had the forum go down and SS and everybody else did amazing work there. Um, so yeah, that part. And I'd say booking. Like I enjoyed like booking matches, and making graphics.
Hmm.
So graphics and record keeping, yeah, I do still get to do. Um, Booking, I don't get to do booking too much, but that's okay because uh, to go into my least favorite part, I'd say sometimes I took some of the criticism of shows too personally,
Hmm.
and I shouldn't have. Like in hindsight, like I think I was kind of just a bit too sensitive about it at the time, and took it a little bit personally. It's hard like writing the shows every week. Um, but yeah, I'd say that was my least favorite part. And
Do
just
you?
keeping everybody at like keeping the peace. Like
Yeah.
it seems like every show, no matter who wins or loses, like half the card's upset and wants to quit. And as a mod, like you want to do everything to keep everybody together, like as a big family forever. And it's hard to do that.
I think mine when I was mod, it was that, and then keeping everyone happy. Like
You know?
making sure everyone has a trying at least. It's not really on the mods to do this, but like if you can at least help trying to make sure every character had a direction and the sense of an upward trajectory. You know, the worst thing is like you don't want like Prodigy certainly at times felt like Par was just kind of running in mud at times and just like not really going anywhere with any direction. Um, and I think that can make writers not be inspired to put out their best work or be as engaged, um, and then lead to them just like quitting. So that was always a thing for me is like, okay, this person lost, it's had a couple losses, like are they gonna quit because they feel like they're not like their trajectory is not going up, towards whatever. um that was always like a big nervous anxiety thing for me when I was mod. um
Yeah, it's like the video games where you have like your roster and they all have morale, and
yeah,
it's like you gotta manage that.
yeah, that's
That's
true.
hard.
That's yeah, it is. But you know what, it's like it's weird to say on like a resume or in like an interview, but it certainly is management experience. So you
Yeah.
could definitely you could use that as a springboard for a professional leap forward. um do you think the brand split was a good idea or a bad idea? And if it was a good idea, this is the brand split in 2021 when we did it all on
Right.
Discord. Do you wish the brand split lasted longer if you think it was a good idea? Because it lasted 1 year.
Yeah, I think if I recall, I was one of the ones that was totally for it.
Hmm.
I think it was exciting. Like it was definitely like I think everybody who's in our Discord now, most of them can remember it and they remember it fondly. So it was very exciting for us at that point. Um, I did like what we were doing. Like we had a big roster at that point that was getting hard to manage, and I liked what we were doing. It was kind of like a preview of what they're doing now with Meltdown and Fallout. But we were having like our fight night shows, and then we were having like a secondary show that had the rest of the card on like a smaller, like we had like Crossfire Christmas and like a Valentine's Day show,
Hmm.
like Steel City. So we were kind of doing similar of like these like special one-off shows to handle the rest of the card. So I kind of like that too. Like we weren't rushed to do it, but the brand split was exciting and it led to a lot of like stories and characters, and we got to really see like SS and Man take their own show and become like the awesome like leaders and mods that they are today. Um, I don't know if they would have been able to do that as well if we kind of all were working together in like this big group, or
Hmm.
if we would have even brought on Man because he was kind of like brought in for that brand split, so we may not have even brought him in. So I think that was definitely the best part of it.
I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good point.
That's for lasting longer than a year. I mean, we kind of knew like brand splits, like the history of them, but we set it
Yeah,
up for that so that we could easily transition if we had to. So it worked out.
yeah. You were in charge of Meltdown, and I would say that both brands had, each brand, I should say, had a unique drafting style. Fallout went for the characters that I think people in Discord like, the characters, just bigger characters, like, just more like diverse characters, and characters that hadn't been world champs yet. And Meltdown went for big names that had been multi-time world champions, like Cyrus and Kennedy and Golden. Do you like how you went about it, or do you wish you could have done it differently with hindsight?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely Fallout saw a lot of potential in some of those guys they drafted that paid off big. Like guys like Randy Roman and Danny Toner all got, or Randy Ramon, got better chances. And if if I draft like Danny Toner or Randy and put them on Meltdown, like with the rest of those guys, they might get buried and might not get
Exactly.
that same push or chance. So I think it worked out for both teams. Only regret, like I think we drafted Mike Garcia way too high.
Yeah.
Whenever Fault was never drafting him in the first place, they said that after, like we were never taking him. I think he was like seventh overall, so we could have probably got like a different person there. Because then he like threatened to quit like right after that. So it's,
He did.
but what can you do?
It was one of the, so like it was that they were never going to take Garcia, if I remember correctly, and they never had any intention of taking Gabby, but neither did you. So Gabby like fell to them in like round 17, which was like a whole angle in and of itself, that, or it got turned into an angle.
Well,
Um,
there is a lot of like a lot of I don't want to say politics, but like there is strategy involved with some of the characters that we took, like for like management purposes or like morale. Like
yeah,
Garcia and like Kaden Knox, like I remember we did not want them on the same brand. Like at least
yeah,
Jimmy and I, like we didn't want them together. Like they had been fighting before that. Um, like Gabby, like I loved Gabby. Like I would have loved to have that character. She would have fit in on that Meltdown brand. But I know that like ETE was, like, to be candid, frustrated, I think, with like some of the like my management like up to that. And I thought he deserved like a fresh of the graders, if man in SS that would keep around longer. So those were kind of like some of the mindsets of
which character aside from your own did you enjoy reading promos for, grading, booking, etc. while you were a mod?
who, that's a tough question. But I would say honestly, AON characters just have this fresh like excitement to them, whether it's Yuna or Lizzie Rose, Belle Connolly, even though I didn't get to look for Belle as much. I did great for her, and I think I've been open about how much I even love some of those. I think I graded Belle to win against Michelle on one of the anniversary shows. So
Mm-hmm.
there's something about like those characters that just get me. So
You and I think anytime any mods, not just you and I, but any mods have had their moments of arguing and not seeing eye to eye. Stuff like that happens after 11 years. Can you recall a moment with any handler that was, and you don't have to answer this if you don't feel comfortable, but it's up to you. Can you recall a moment with any handler that was like the biggest amount of heat you've had, was like the biggest amount of like animosity you've had with someone? And
oh
it
geez.
probably is Sayer, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's the obvious answer as far as like actual real animosity goes. I
Yeah.
mean, there's times where I've had guys that like opponents that I really wanted to beat. Like I remember whenever Grim had Dominic Armistead and he
Mm-hmm.
was facing Sully for the NA title. And he had like posted some tweets in the Twitter thread like talking all this trash on Sully. And I was just thinking like, oh, I'm gonna bring it now. Like I wanna beat this guy. I'm gonna like bring it so hard. And I think he ended up not even RPing for that match, but I remember that like I had wanted to win that one so bad. But there wasn't any actual real animosity there.
Yeah.
I think Sayer's the only one that I can truly say that there was some real heat. But
Which characters did you most enjoy working with, like feud wise, angle wise?
ooh. We already talked about Thomas Jordan,
Yeah.
who kind of like introduced me to like how you can do a real good feud. Um, Other than that, I'd say even though it was, some might say it was stale and went on too long, like that Gabby Sully feud over Sully's entire world title reign, was really enjoyable. ETE was always like writing up a new segment, and even in some parts where he wrote for Sully and wrote like segments that like fit what Sully would say, it's fun working on. We had that build off at the end, so yeah, I'd say that was a great moment.
Which feud, not a random one-on-one match like that match against Cyrus on Fight Night, but like a full-blown feud, which feud did you enjoy the most and which did you enjoy the least?
I feel like one of the biggest criticisms, if you want to hold Sully back, is that he didn't have enough of those actual real like story feuds. Like he
Mm-hmm.
was always like this character that like was a collector. Like he loved collecting titles and he was like to be the one on top. But as far as like an actual intense like back and forth feud hating somebody like character wise, like if I could do it differently, I'd like want to do that, like have him build real feuds of people, real stories. Because like during his whole world title reign, the reason why people say he was stale is because he had like Golden Rock versus the Toners and like MVH and Par and Crash and all these things going on, and just for Sully it was stale. So um like I said, that Thomas Jordan feud was a good one. Um Least, I'd say, I mean, maybe the Sayer feud, the Mike
Mm-hmm.
Garcia feud, because it went on quite a while. So I think that one's fair to say.
Which title reign did you enjoy the most and which did you enjoy the least?
Hmm.
I think I can guess your least. I think your least is going to be your second world title reign, just because
You
it.
know,
But you can maybe I'm wrong on that. But anyway, you can start with your most.
yeah, I'd say my most. It's fair to say that the first World Title reign. That was
Yeah.
like, I think it was my favorite because it was that moment that proved that I was like a main eventer.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, like I said, Sully was like had this glass ceiling. He was in the X division and was there for 7 years and hadn't done anything more than the X title. Um, and then in the course of the year, he's got like an NA title and he's a triple champ and a world champ. So like that was the moment where I could appreciate who I was as a writer finally. Um, the least favorite, I I don't know if I would say it was the second world title reign. Um, I think I always knew that Soy was like out after 409 days or whatever for that first world title reign. Like he was gonna be like taking a break from the world title picture, no matter what after that reign ended. Um, and and he snuck in and got like an extra world title reign. And whenever you look back at characters' histories, two world title reigns looks a lot better than just one. Like there's a
Right.
lot of guys that have a one-off world title reign, but there's only like a good handful to have two. So
Right.
I gotta I gotta appreciate that. Um, I can't say that it was the NA title because that was his first snowy NA reign. Uh, I'd have to say it was probably the second X title reign. It lasted just a little bit too short and um, ended with an upset to Thomas Jordan, which did kick off that good feud, but it was kind of like this awkward in between.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I'd say it was that one, but it's hard to pick. It's like your babies; you love them all, right?
Right. Did you ever stop caring about your promos grades? And that's there can be like a yes and no to that, but there's also can be like a lot of gray where it's like you know, I stopped caring a lot or I only cared a little bit after a while. Um and if so, when did you stop caring a lot or when did you stop caring at all?
Honestly, I think it depends on the match. Like I wouldn't say it was like a phase or an era where like I didn't care, but more so like a match or just like the amount of energy I have. Like there's promos where you just don't have the energy to write like a full blown Jurassic Park promo, and you kind of mail it in. So like that's the promos are like, yeah, if I lose this one, like I can understand that. Like I didn't deserve to win this one, so I'd say those are the moments.
All right, which writers inspired you? You can't say me. You can give shout outs to other people. And this can be people from way back when you joined, and this can be people obviously, inspiration doesn't stop just because you've been around for a long time. So obviously there's people who may be inspiring you today. Which writers do you think you've gotten the most inspiration from over the 11 years?
It's a shame that I can't say you because I
You can't
remember
see me.
like back in 2012, whenever we had this Facebook conversation, like on Messenger, where you're like giving me all these tips on how to actually be a good writer, and I built off that. But to say five other names, I think it's fair to say that Jiggy is one that like I love his style. I've always been a big Chris Kennedy mark. Um, just some of the way that like Chris Kennedy goes on these big monologues and rants, um, like is part of Sulley. Uh, Wolf, we had some conversations about Wolf and whether he, is overrated or not. Um, there were some really creative promos like that, like Noir promo that kind of gave me some inspiration for even that detective promo that won me the world title.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say uh, the creativity of SS, going all the way back to just John Luke Watkins' character. I can remember even his application, his profile page, like was this Wikipedia page that like was so I was
Hmm.
envious of. I was like, that's amazing. And just like the presentation from that, and some of the presentation he was using like early on in his promos, uh, was great. Let me think. Cyrus Truth and just some of the world building and fantasy that Cyrus brings to the table from like day in and day out. Um, and then if I had to say a last one, I mean, there's so many names. I'd say even Crash, like some of the promos that like Wolf Crash gives us, um, just the way that he writes some of his creative promos himself. And I think Crash even said he got some inspiration from some of my promos, but then I read that inspiration he got, like going back to like him and Parf or Buddy Cop's promos and
Hmm.
some of the different creativity and ways that they were able to like use a narrative that they did. Um, I take from that too. So yeah. I know I said five, but if I had to sneak one in there, like Dub is one that I read his promo for on the last pay-per-view, with that office and that theme he did there. If you haven't read it, I would suggest it because it was a great one. Um, and that sort of inspired me to kind of get out of this funk that I was in, and start writing the way that I used to again. So I have to give a nod to him as well.
Awesome. Those are great writers to get inspiration from for sure. Who is your top five of all time? And you can say Sully if you want, and you can say Golden. That's fine.
Yeah, and I definitely have to say Golden. I feel like with the amount of world title reigns that he's had, I might not have said Golden in the last like 3 years ago,
Hmm.
but Golden had this last final push where he was winning like a couple more world title reigns and really establishing himself as like the veteran, like Hall of Famer that he is. And I'd say at that point is never he established himself as definitely in that top five Mount Rushmore category. After that, like I said, I'm a big Chris Kennedy mark.
Hmm.
Kennedy's, top five for sure. He's got, I think, does he have the most? He definitely has the most FWA World Championships. Does he have the most
He does, yeah.
title reigns?
No, not
Yeah.
the most title, not the most, like the most.
No, Golden has the most overall title
He has
reigns,
the
right?
most overall, but Kennedy, yeah, Kennedy has the most world title reigns
Yeah.
still, with like six or either six or seven. I think it's six. I could
Um,
be wrong. It could be seven actually. It's one of those, but he does have the most.
and then I know Rondo's up there too. He's got a ton of title reigns. Like you got to put him in there. And just for storytelling wise, a lot of war with him and Golden for sure. Um, After that, Stu St. Clair, he's been up there for a lot of title reigns. He's got, I think Stu, I always picture as like the Undertaker of Crossfire. Like,
Yeah,
how the Undertaker on SmackDown is like that World Heavyweight Champion. You picture that.
definitely,
Like
definitely.
Stu, so you kind of picture as like, of Crossfire. Was that was that four?
That's
Maybe
four.
one more? Oh.
You can put
And see,
Sully in there.
I could. I don't think Sully's quite ready for it yet. You know, like there's definitely these tiers where you have Sully and MVH and maybe even like Chris Peacock and Aleister Black of some of the hardware he's been collecting this the last year.
Hmm.
Um, but I still feel like with this last group, honestly, I think I have to still put Wolf in there.
Okay.
You may disagree, some people may disagree, but he's a Grand Slam champion. You have to respect that. He's only one of three. Um, So that's a hard accomplishment. And even though he doesn't have as many hardware or as many stories, um, he kind of reminds me of Sully in a way. So yeah, I put Wolf in there at number five.
All
Uh,
right. That's a
I
good.
am a big believer that you have to have like different eras. Like there's like the PWS era.
Mm-hmm.
There's the early wrestling cricket era, and now you have like this era of like MVH and Peacock and Danny Toner and Randy Ramone. So uh, all of those names will definitely be on their own Mount Rushmore at some point.
When Wrestling Click closed, there's two more questions. When Wrestling Click closed, did you have any reservations about coming to Wrestling Smarks, the new forum, like you did after PWS closed?
Yeah,
Or
when PWS closed, I did. But whenever Wrestling Click closed, it was kind of like, like same old story again. Like I'm used to it. I didn't have to look back and reflect the fact that it didn't seem like it, but I was on Wrestling Click for 10 years, while the other
I
forums felt
know,
like they're longer, and they're like 2 years.
I
So
know.
it
It's
was hard to,
crazy.
yeah.
It's
Um,
crazy. It did not feel like 10 years. Like it did not feel that long. It felt
I
like
think
a blip.
what helped though was we had like a warning, we had like time to transition and get everything together and pack,
Hmm.
so to speak. Whereas PWS was kind of like abrupt and not as much of a warning. So
Yeah, it's like the packing is a really good metaphor. You can take it a step further where like, yeah, we were given our eviction notice with a lot of time to pack.
yeah,
And at PWS, we basically came home from the days of work, and there's a letter, there's like a piece of paper on the front of our door saying you've been
boxes
evicted
outside.
and you can't go in. Yeah, and your boxes are all outside. No, no, they gave your boxes away. You don't even get
Yeah,
your boxes because we didn't get any of our archives. We barely got like we had like one box.
right,
So
exactly.
like your
We got
boxes
like
have been given.
from the Wayback Machine was all we could get out of that.
Right. Right. Um, last question. Question 50. We've been doing this for an hour and a half.
Wow.
You've done this all with Sully, the King Sullivan character, Saint Sully, and I've already asked you if he'll return. Maybe he will. We'll see. You know, you had Ty Johnson, you've had Kleio, you've had the Coven, you have the Coven currently. Um, what more is there for you to accomplish? And you mentioned like, maybe Sully comes, maybe the Saint Sully, King Sullivan character comes back with Sammy Sully as a character, and there's like somehow he's pulled into being a manager or being a tag team champion and finishing that Grand Slam thing. So like there's the Grand Slam thing that's kind of still there as like this kind of nugget of something that you can go for if you want to go for like, one of those like tentpole accomplishment type things on the history page. Um, but maybe there's something else that you want to accomplish. Maybe there's something else that's more abstract than that. Or is it less about accomplishing or equally about accomplishing and equally or more about just doing this because you like doing it and you like being a part of Discord and you like writing and you like being in the community? And it can be both of those things. Like
Yeah,
what is keeping you around?
I definitely would say it's both. Like I like to be part at this point, just to participate and help out. Like every member is part of the community, and without members, like the FWA wouldn't be the FWA. So like I'm a part of that, and I want to keep it alive. Um, if I had to pick an accolade, I really want, well, two things. I want one of my characters other than Sully to actually win a title and prove like it's not Sully, like I can win with other characters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I want to prove that like I can like do a tag team. Like I've had all these single titles, but like even with Sully or the Coven, Cleo, like I haven't been able to like work as a tag team yet. And I had this really good thing, like Walsh and I are like working very well together and have a good partnership. So hopefully, like we could be a team, whether it's with the trios or like down the line. We'll see what happens there. But uh, yeah, those are the two things. But even if none of that happens, like I love being part of the community and being part of the Discord and just helping keep the FWA growing and keeping it alive. So yeah,
I appreciate it, man. 50 questions. We knocked them all out. We were talking about
yeah, we
doing
did.
this in 2 nights and half because we'd be tired or whatever. We knocked it all out. Um, I appreciate you taking this time. You know, I there I don't really know what else to say in terms of a closing. Is there anything else you want to say? Because again, you've been in the FWA for 11 years. You've been a mod. You know, you've had multiple characters. You have a character who's going to be in the Hall of Fame or is in the Hall of Fame. What is there anything else that to close it all out, or is it just I'm still here? I'm still kicking it. What is
I
it?
think I think I would say that like and since I've been in the FWA all this time, I feel like the community that we have and like the Discord and the strength and just the leadership of everybody, like mods and non-mods. Um, and maybe you can speak to this as well, but I feel like it's the strongest that's ever been.
It's up
Um,
there.
we have our moments, we have our fights, um, but I think everyone's as close and closer than they've ever been. Um, like SS, Man, Jimmy, Dub, all of them are leading like Battle Tank. They're leading great and writing like show wise, been like quality wise, been better than it's ever been. And just like I feel like the FWA is in good hands and it's gonna be thriving for years to come. Thriving to the point where I can, in 5, 10 years bring Sammy Sullivan in and have her be a champion at some point.
I think so. Part of it is like it's an injection of new people too that has happened over the past, X amount of months since we came to Wrestling Smarks. And the injection of new people in part becomes from the fact that we went to Wrestling Smarks too. So like, you're on Wrestling Click and you get a couple new signups every now and then, but like for the most part it's the same group. But I've noticed over the past few months, and I'm not as active as a lot of people are, or have been lately, that there's more people, there's newer people, and a lot of those people it comes from just being in a new forum probably. But I think it's that like fresh blood that also kind of keeps it active and lively and interesting and engaging, and you know it's a community that we all know each other, but it's also a community that isn't dull from just the same people.
Right.
I think that I'm not. It's not dull. Dull is probably the wrong word, but it's important to continually add freshness and add fresh layers, which is really new people to it. And I think we've done that with going to Wrestling Smarks. We did it by necessity, but there's still a benefit from that we're getting all these, just new members of the community who are very active and engaging on Discord. So, I think that's a huge thing. I agree with you that it's more lively and stronger than it had that I can remember than any time I can remember. There's probably one or two that are others that would rival it, but it's definitely up there for sure. So I agree with you. All right, man. Well, we've done it. We're here. We got through it all. I appreciate you doing this with me. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being the guest. There was a lot of talk about like whenever I first was doing the podcast that you and Sayer would be on this together. I didn't like the
Yeah.
idea. The only reason why I liked the idea, if anything, was so that I could have someone else yell, like have someone else with me yell at them. But I still didn't want to do that. I didn't want to sacrifice your opportunity to do this on your own for you. So I'm glad that we got to do it. And I'm glad that I got to do it with someone who's been in the FWA for a long time, because obviously there's a lot of questions and there's a lot to talk about, and we did talk about a lot. So I'm glad you're still kicking, man. I'm glad you're still doing it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, Untitled FWA Podcast. We're out. This is TGO. This is Sully. Um, and I appreciate everyone listening. We appreciate everyone listening, and we appreciate the FWA as a whole. See y'all in the Discord.